My name is Alex, and I graduated from the University of Michigan in 2018. My college experience was mostly great, good friends, decent grades, and a lot of memories. But there's one memory I wish I could erase, one that still haunts me to this day. It happened during my sophomore year, and it's the reason I'm much more cautious about meeting people now. It all started when I was looking for a part-time job. I wanted something flexible that wouldn't interfere with my classes, so I started browsing online job boards. After a few days of searching, I came across a listing for a personal assistant position. The pay was great, almost too good to be true, and the description was vague but intriguing. It mentioned helping with scheduling, errands, and some light administrative work. The ad was posted by someone named Mr. Grayson, and it included an email address to contact for more details. I sent an email expressing my interest and attached my resume. Within an hour, I got a response. Mr. Grayson thanked me for reaching out and said he was impressed with my background. He asked if I could meet him for an interview the next day at a cafe downtown. I was excited. This seemed like the perfect opportunity. I replied immediately, confirming the time and place. The next day, I arrived at the cafe about 10 minutes early. It was a small, cozy spot, and I grabbed a table near the window. I waited, scrolling through my phone, but as the minutes passed, no one approached me. After about 20 minutes, I started to feel uneasy. I double-checked the email to make sure I had the right time and place. Everything matched. Just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed with a new email. It was from Mr. Grayson. He apologized for being late and explained that he had been caught up in a meeting. He asked if I could meet him at his office instead, which was just a few blocks away. He included the address and assured me it wouldn't take long. I hesitated for a moment, but I figured it wasn't unusual for someone busy to have a last-minute change of plans. I replied that I was on my way and left the cafe. The address led me to an older office building that looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. The lobby was dimly lit, and the elevator creaked as I rode it up to the third floor. When I stepped out, the hallway was eerily quiet. Most of the doors were closed, and the few that were open revealed empty offices. I found the door with the number Mr. Grayson had given me. It was slightly ajar, and I could see a faint light coming from inside. I knocked lightly and pushed the door open. The office was small and sparsely furnished, just a desk, a couple of chairs, and a filing cabinet. A man was sitting behind the desk, typing on a laptop. He looked to be in his late 40s, with neatly combed gray hair and a sharp suit. He smiled when he saw me and stood up to shake my hand. "Alex, right? Thanks for coming," he said. His voice was calm and friendly, which put me at ease. He gestured for me to sit down, and we started the interview. At first, everything seemed normal. He asked about my schedule, my experience, and why I was interested in the position. But as the conversation went on, his questions started to feel off. He asked if I lived alone, if I had a lot of friends in the area, and if anyone knew I was here. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off as small talk, but my gut was telling me something wasn't right. Then he leaned forward, his smile fading. "You seem like a smart person, Alex," he said, "but smart people can make mistakes too. You should always be careful about who you trust." My heart started racing. I forced a smile and asked what he meant, but he didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and walked to the door, closing it quietly. The sound of the lock clicking sent a wave of panic through me. I stood up, trying to stay calm, and said I needed to leave because I had another appointment. He didn't move from the door. "Sit down," he said, his voice cold and firm. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. I glanced at the desk and saw a heavy paperweight sitting on top of it. Without thinking, I grabbed it and held it up. "Let me out," I said, my voice shaking. He stared at me for a moment, then smirked. "All right," he said, stepping aside. "Go ahead." I didn't wait for him to change his mind. I unlocked the door and bolted down the hallway, not looking back. I didn't stop running until I was outside and halfway down the block. My hands were shaking as I called my roommate, telling her what had happened. She came to pick me up, and I spent the rest of the day trying to process what had just occurred. I never reported the incident. I didn't even know what I would say. But I deleted the email thread and blocked the address, vowing to be more cautious in the future. To this day, I don't know what Mr. Grayson's intentions were, and I don't want to find out. All I know is that I was lucky to get out of there when I did. My family and I were driving to college to help me move in as I was starting my first year. Once we arrived, I found out I'd be living in a suite-style dorm, sharing a bathroom with 3 other people. I already knew one of the guys in the other room from orientation, but my actual roommate, Ethan, was someone I hadn't met before. We exchanged a few messages on Instagram before moving in, but his replies were short and vague. His profile didn't give much away either, just a few random pictures of landscapes and some cryptic captions. When I finally met Ethan, he seemed off. He was tall and lanky, with messy hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in weeks. He barely made eye contact and spoke in a low, monotone voice. I tried to make small talk, asking him about his major and hobbies, but he gave one-word answers and quickly retreated to his side of the room. I figured he was just shy and decided to give him some space. The first few days were uneventful, but I started noticing some strange habits. Ethan would stay up all night, sitting at his desk with his headphones on, muttering to himself. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of him laughing quietly or tapping his fingers rhythmically on the desk. He never seemed to leave the room, not even to eat. His side of the room was cluttered with random objects, old books, empty soda cans, and what looked like broken electronics. One night, I came back late from hanging out with some friends. The room was dark, and I assumed Ethan was asleep. As I was getting ready for bed, I felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I turned around and saw Ethan sitting up in his bed, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. I froze and asked him if he was okay. He didn't respond, just tilted his head slightly and smiled. I quickly got into bed, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest. After a few minutes, I heard him whisper, "You shouldn't have come back so late." I didn't respond and pretended to be asleep until I eventually drifted off. Over the next few weeks, things only got weirder. I started noticing that some of my belongings were missing. Small things like a pen, a pair of socks, or a notebook. At first, I thought I was just being forgetful. But then I found one of my missing socks under Ethan's bed while I was looking for something I dropped. When I confronted him about it, he just shrugged and said, "It must have fallen there by accident." One day, I came back to the dorm earlier than usual after my class was canceled. When I opened the door, Ethan was standing in the middle of the room, holding one of my t-shirts. He looked startled and quickly shoved it into his desk drawer. I asked him what he was doing, and he stammered something about cleaning up. I didn't believe him, but I didn't want to escalate the situation, so I let it go. A few nights later, I woke up to a strange sound. It was a faint scratching noise, like someone was dragging their nails across a surface. I turned on my phone's flashlight and saw Ethan crouched by my desk, his back to me. I asked him what he was doing, and he slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes looked wild, and he was holding one of my notebooks. "I was just borrowing it," he said, his voice shaky. I told him to put it back and go to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The breaking point came a month later. I was looking for my phone charger and couldn't find it anywhere. I decided to check Ethan's side of the room while he was out. As I was searching through his desk, I found a small box hidden in the back of one of the drawers. Inside were several of my missing items: my phone charger, a pair of socks, a pen, and even a photo of me that I didn't remember taking. There was also a small notebook filled with strange, scribbled drawings and notes. Some of the notes mentioned me by name, with phrases like, "He doesn't know," and "soon." I felt sick to my stomach and immediately called my RA. When Ethan came back, I confronted him about the box. He didn't deny it, just stood there silently, staring at me with an unreadable expression. The RA arrived shortly after and took the box as evidence. Ethan was moved to another dorm the next day, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Even now, months later, I still wonder what he meant by soon and what he was planning. It happened to me during my sophomore year of college in 2021. I went to a small liberal arts school in a rural area, and while it wasn't known for crazy parties, Halloween week was always an exception. The campus would come alive with costume parties, haunted house events, and late-night gatherings. My friends and I had planned to attend a party at an off-campus house that was notorious for throwing the best Halloween bashes. That night, I dressed as a vampire, complete with fake blood and fangs, and we headed out around 10 p.m. The house was packed, music was blasting, and everyone was in high spirits. I was having a great time, dancing and drinking with my friends. At some point, I realized I hadn't eaten much that day, and the alcohol was hitting me harder than usual. I told my friends I needed some air and stepped outside to clear my head. The house was in a secluded area surrounded by woods, and the cool October air felt refreshing. I wandered a little further from the house, trying to sober up, when I noticed a faint light flickering in the distance through the trees. It looked like it could be another house, or maybe a bonfire. Curious and slightly tipsy, I decided to check it out. I figured it might be another party, or just something interesting to see. As I got closer, I realized the light was coming from an old, rundown building. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, with broken windows and graffiti covering the walls. The light was coming from inside, flickering like a candle or a weak bulb. I hesitated for a moment, but my curiosity got the better of me. I stepped through the broken doorway and into the building. The air inside was cold and damp, and the faint smell of mildew filled my nose. The flickering light was coming from a room down the hall. I walked slowly, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and the floor creaked with every step. When I reached the room, I peeked inside. There was a single candle burning on a table, and the room was otherwise empty, except for a few old chairs and a pile of what looked like blankets in the corner. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something about the scene felt off, like I wasn't supposed to be there. I turned to leave, but as I did, I heard the faint sound of footsteps coming from somewhere deeper in the building. My heart started racing. I told myself it was probably just another curious student, or maybe someone from the party. But the sound of the footsteps was slow and deliberate, like someone was trying to be quiet. I quickly made my way back toward the entrance, but as I reached the doorway, I heard a loud bang behind me, like a door slamming shut. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The footsteps were getting louder now, and they were coming toward me. I bolted out of the building and into the woods, running as fast as I could. The branches scratched at my arms and face, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. After what felt like forever, I stopped to catch my breath and looked back. I couldn't see the building anymore, but I could hear something moving in the woods behind me. It sounded like someone crashing through the underbrush, getting closer. I started running again, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know where I was going, but I just kept moving, hoping to find the road or the party house. Finally, I saw the faint glow of lights through the trees and realized I was back near the house. I stumbled out of the woods, covered in scratches and out of breath. My friends were outside, smoking and laughing, and they immediately ran over to me when they saw the state I was in. I tried to explain what had happened, but I was so shaken that my words came out in a jumbled mess. The next day, I told them everything. We decided to go back to the building in the daylight to see if we could figure out what it was. When we got there, the place looked even more abandoned than I remembered. The candle was gone, and the pile of blankets in the corner was just a heap of old rags. There was no sign of anyone else having been there, but the eerie feeling remained. To this day, I have no idea who or what was in that building with me. I try not to think about what might have happened if I hadn't run when I did. It's a memory that still sends shivers down my spine, and I've never gone back to that part of the woods again.